Thank you very much all for making time today. It is wonderful to see you all out there. We have the great pleasure of yet another webinar on our IAU series on the future of higher education. And today it is a question of quality. What is a good university? And we're very, very glad to have three speakers here to share their views on what is a good university. We are delighted to have Kat Schwaig from Kennesaw State University in Georgia in the US, and she's the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, and the Dino's Eminent Scholar Chair of Entrepreneurial Management and Professor of Management Information. Then we also have David Fitzpatrick, who is the President of the Technological University of Dublin. And indeed, he is the inaugural president, which is also a theme that we'll be talking about, of a very new university in Dublin. We're very glad also to have Mariette Westerman, who is the Vice Chancellor of Nyu Abu Dhabi. And Mariette was also former Executive Vice President of Andrew Mellon Foundation. It's wonderful to have you all here today. What we discussed was a webinar really on a question of quality, and quality is something that we have that is present in every mission statement of universities around the world, and yet it is very, very difficult to define, and there are many aspects to universities and quality and what is a good university. Let me also add that Hilje van Lant is here present with us today, and it is wonderful to say that she will be wrapping up also and giving some closing remarks and also helping us on the questions and answers. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat. Maybe I'll give the floor to Hilje really quick to start us off in the very beginning and introduce a bit, maybe also the IAU to those who don't know the association as well as we do, and then we'll get right going. Thank you, Hilje.
Thank you very much, Andres. Andres Corcoran is the Deputy Secretary General of the International Association of Universities, that I am pleased to serve as Secretary General. These preliminary words are also necessary to let people in. We are now all used to pivoting online to have these panel discussions, which are a unique opportunity to really get all the voices out and to connect each other better around the world. We have, in principle, 100 people registered for this webinar today from some 40 countries from around the world, and so it will take a little bit of time for people to come in. We also know from experience in this IAU webinar series on the future of higher education that we launched right at the beginning of the pandemic as a new way to communicate and to certainly not stop reflecting on where higher education is going. And while offering opportunities for people to liaise in the beginning to discuss COVID-19 and its impact on higher education for the most part of the initial discussions, but today to also use this unique opportunity to have these weekly encounters to debate further where higher education is heading, what future for higher education. And we thought it would be an ideal time, a little bit over a year into the pandemic, to ask the question again about what is a quality, what is a good university, how do you define that, and where can we go way beyond the R word that we will not use, the rankings, but instead go to really defining what higher education stands for and where is it heading. The COVID-19 and the pandemic have had various impacts on higher education and also triggered many questions on the positioning of higher education in institutions, universities at large in our societies. What roles did they have in the past? How to define them today? And now this whole year has been an opportunity to also address the various challenges that were there before, have been sometimes exacerbated, and the various opportunities anew for rethinking what higher education stands for and where it could go. And so we are very honored to have these three esteemed speakers that Andreas just introduced, with three various, very different background and perspectives. Even though, if I may say so, Mariette, you cover 3 continents by being and from Europe and from the Middle East, and also with a long period in North America. And David, you say you're more from Ireland. You have worked in Ireland most. And Kathy, it's an honor to meet you here for the first time. But you may have also these bridges to other continents throughout your own work and life experience. And that is what makes for the richness of this discussion here today, because your perspectives will allow to see how to define what a good university is from your different perspectives. So back to you, Andreas.
Thank you, Hillige. Thank you very much. And let's get right into it. Maybe I'll address the word Kat, possibly, if you could come in. And well, I was thinking that in the first round of this conversation, maybe you could just set the scene and explain the context in which you operate. We know that Kennesaw State University is in Georgia, and maybe you could give us a little bit of insights into what kind of a university it is and whom it serves. And then the same question goes to the 2 other speakers, and so that we understand a little bit the context in which you operate. Thank you.
Wonderful, and it's such a pleasure to be here this morning. And I do want to extend the regrets of our president, Pamela Whitten, who was to be here today and had an urgent matter that she had to address this morning. So I'm delighted to be here today with the distinguished fellow panelists as well. I am the Provost and Senior Vice President of Academic Affairs at Kennesaw State University. So in that regard, I'm responsible for the academic mission of the institution, the teaching, the research, and also the service that our faculty provide and that our staff members support. We are the 2nd largest university in the state of Georgia. We have just over 41,000 students. We have programs at the undergraduate level, at the master's level, and at the doctorate level. We've also experienced incredible growth. I've been at this institution for about 18 years. When I got here, we had about 12,000 students. We were primarily a commuter school at that time, and then didn't have doctoral programs. And so just massive transformation in really the culture of this place and the focus of this place. A commuter school is very different from a resident school. So in a very short period of time, we've seen just incredible changes. We have a very diverse student body. We're about half female, half male, and a very diverse student body with respect to race and ethnicity, with about 47% of our students non-white. KSU was recently elevated to an R2 status, so our Carnegie R2 status, which denotes very high research activity. And it places us among the top 6% of colleges and universities in the United States with respect to research. We have research areas that we focus on: biomedical and health services, computing and technology, human development and well-being, and sustainable and safe communities. Excuse me. Certainly, we have a strong momentum, as demonstrated by our students, our faculty, and also just the external support that has been increasing in a number of years. For us, quality is about meeting and exceeding the expectations of our stakeholders. And our stakeholders are primarily our students, but it's also the mission of our state. Our state is very much focused on educating Georgians and educating those in the region. And so we care deeply about what our stakeholders look for. And in recent years, the state has been very interested in workforce development and making sure that we offer relevant degrees that will have a high impact on the lives of the students, not only while they are here, but certainly when they leave campus. But our students are the center of our universe. They are our focus. And so we do all that we can to make sure that they have an incredible experience while they're here at KSU. And a lot of that actually begins before they get here. Lots of communication before they get here, lots of interaction with them while they're here. In fact, the senior leadership team regularly each semester will call all of our freshmen. So when we divide that up, that means that each of us is calling about 200 freshmen, and we call them and have a conversation with them, and it's just to let them know that they really matter to us. So that experience that the students have, that they know that they're welcome here, is so important. And that's a challenge when you're 41,000 students. We have a great student affairs team that performs a lot of, that engages our students through a lot of fun activities. We have a huge focus on student support with advisors and with tutors and other type of learning assistance that we can provide our students. And then we're also a very community engaged institution. We care about interacting with our community and that reciprocal relationship that I think is so important. So with that, I will pause and turn it back to you.
Thank you, Kat. I'll floor straight over to David. David, the Technical University of Dublin, or Technical University Dublin, and we're still, as an Irishman, we're still trying to get around because indeed it is a new university, and that's why it is not coming over the lips so easily yet. But it is indeed very interesting because Ireland has a vibrant higher education scene, and it's wonderful to see yet another university coming up. And of course, there is a long standing tradition within TU Dublin, because it is various institutions that have been forged into a university. And why I'm saying this, it is interesting because, of course, many of the universities that are represented here today have been around for some time. TU Dublin is new, so it also has a new, how should I say, a strategic plan, I guess. You know, it's putting itself on the map. So what do you think is TU Dublin doing in terms of bringing value, new value, so to speak, new impetus to the Irish higher education scene? And maybe you could give us a little bit of the background to the founding of TU Dublin. That'd be wonderful.
Sure. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to join my fellow panelists today. As you say, TU Dublin is new, although it's getting older every day, of course. We were founded 1st of January 2019 was our inaugural date, but built on 3 institutions coming together that are now dissolved. But effectively, the oldest of those is in existence for over 130 years, the former Dublin Institute of Technology. So we're on a journey from becoming an institute of technology through to being a full university. And of course, that creates many challenges and many opportunities. But in that single step, overnight from December into January 2019, we became arguably the largest university in the country as an amalgamated entity. We have 29,000 students, 3,000 staff. And within the Dublin region, we have 3 main campuses. So we cover the city centre, and then on the outskirts to the west of Dublin, 2 other campuses. Interestingly, each of those campuses are directly located not only in proximity to key industry sectors, but also to key areas of traditionally socio-economically disadvantaged communities. And that's an underlying element of our mission. We look to engage strongly with industry, and our research, although has fundamental research, is actually very much aligned at trying to solve major global challenges and major industry challenges. So that proximity to industry in research, but also in terms of education and program development, is something we are proud of and are looking to do even more of. And the other aspect that makes us different to a traditional university is that we actually deliver qualifications and awards all the way up from level 6 in the Irish system, which is sort of higher certificate level, through to PhD, so level 6 through to level 10. And of course, the majority of those are delivered in a traditional student model where it's a full-time program, but it's also increasingly now more part-time and more remote, even pre-COVID, more remote learning environments as well. So within that mix, we include traditional apprenticeships as well as degree program areas. And that heritage of practice and practically based learning and experiential learning is something that we are looking to build on and to bring into all of our program areas, as well as the sort of more theoretically constructed program activities. So we have a lot of heritage and a deep tradition of community engagement. And I think that proximity to community and industry is one of the factors that sort of combine to make us strategically different from many students' points of view. In terms of what we want to do and where we want to go, we would like to take advantage of our approaches and our offerings to ensure that we offer maximum flexibility to students in how they engage. And I know there are many countries and regions around the world that probably do this very well already, but in the Irish context, we have a pretty traditional model of 3- and 4-year undergraduate bachelor's degree programs leading on to masters and PhDs. And you commit to do that up front, and you go into your program and you finish, and then you move on. We're much more interested in how we can develop and increase the engagement of students in a more bite-sized manner. So it could be part-time engagement, but starting at a low level and then accrediting or accumulating credits as you go through the system. And ultimately, to really try and encourage engagement with our industry connections and the wider community around progressive reskilling, upskilling, and training and development for the future work, and as that develops as well. So it's a new entity built on tradition, but hoping to make quite a significant impact through that approach.
Thank you, David, for this for setting the scene of TU Dublin in the higher education landscape in Ireland, particularly, and which we know we're going to move from the far west of Europe to the Middle East, and we're very, very happy to have Mariette Westerman here, a Vice Chancellor of NYU Abu Dhabi, and indeed there, Mariette, please also fill us in. It is a university, of course, which has 2 geolocations in YU, which normally associated with New York, and Abu Dhabi, of course, in the Middle East. So it would be wonderful if you could set the scene for the institution that you represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas, and thank you, Hillig. I want to thank both of you for inviting me to speak on this very interesting panel. We are a relatively young member of the International Association of Universities, which of course is doing such a wonderful job keeping our academic community connected around the world during the pandemic. It is more important than ever. I want to say something about NYU Abu Dhabi for you that will echo quite a bit of what Kathy and David have said. We're not quite as young as David, but we're also older than David. Let me put it this way, because we are a university that was started in 2010. We had our first students, rather, that we admitted in 2010. And we are a joint initiative of New York University, a university that is by now 190 years old, and the government of Abu Dhabi, our great partners here in the United Arab Emirates. We were styled from the beginning, and I must say I was there at the beginning. I was the first provost of NYU Abu Dhabi. I always like to say I was a provost without a university because we were building it from 2007 to 2010 when I went to the Mellon Foundation because I needed to be back in New York with my family. But I've come back as Vice Chancellor, as you've said. And so I can give you a bit of an arc of our now 11-year young institution. So we're a joint initiative of Abu Dhabi government and New York University. And we were styled from the beginning as a university in and of Abu Dhabi and the UAE, in and of New York University as a global research institution, and in and of the world, resolutely international, and with a lean in our mission, very deliberate from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed here, who is the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, and was the partner really for President John Sexton then of NYU, to come together and say this university isn't going to just be that, it's also going to be for a better world. So with a very hopeful, forward-looking mission that's only become more important in the most recent years, I think, when you look at what's happened to international solidarity and these enormous challenges of climate change, inequality, and now also a raging pandemic. So what was NYU Abu Dhabi going to be? The first thing I want to say is that the UAE has wonderful universities and technical colleges, vocational colleges, and a whole range of institutions. Going back to the beginning of the country, 2071. 1971. It's a 50-year young country. We were brought to bring an international research university into the mix and create something very special around a liberal arts college in the North American tradition, but liberal arts college with its implications of a small scale, close relations to professors and so forth, global recruitment of students, but taking that tradition of the small seminar school, the in-person school, and decentering it out of the West in terms of its attitude to the world, because of course Abu Dhabi sits beautifully between Africa, Europe, Asia, and actually pretty far away from North and South America, not to mention Australia. So it is a very different way of thinking when you bring that American education, of which I'm a beneficiary myself, and bring that to this part of the world. We also said from the start that although we would start from students, I've loved the emphasis on students that Kathy and David have both brought. There are no universities without students, we always like to say. But from building around this liberal arts college, we also layered on top of it and around it the heft of a global research university, that is NYU, that actually operates not only in New York, but also in Shanghai and 14 other study sites on 6 continents. So this is a very interesting concept when you think about it. We really are also a degree granting campus in that structure of NYU, granting degrees in New York, here in Abu Dhabi, and in Shanghai. These are full degree granting and campuses working across all disciplines, basically. And therefore, because we are also young and we got started in 2010, there's a lot of interdisciplinarity between the sciences and engineering, which seems kind of obvious, but also towards the social sciences, the humanities, and the arts. The Liberal Arts College was built very quickly for a Liberal Arts College. The numbers are nothing like the ones that you've just heard, but by now we have about 1,650 undergraduate students, but they come from more than 115 countries and speak about 120 languages among them as first languages, which is a very interesting idea. 20% of the students are from the UAE, but we were really brought to bring talent from around the world and find it however we could. And this is a very interesting idea, because if you believe, as my fellow speakers clearly do, that universities exist to develop talent and help people deploy these talents in whichever way can be done, and that is our ethical responsibility, you also have to help people be able to have access to such an education. And if there are resource gaps, you have to try the best you can to close them. And this is a remarkable thing about NYU Abu Dhabi. We are lucky to be a need-blind admissions institution, and we find students anywhere in the world. And we have an extremely fine-grained process for finding them that I can say more about. But that's what led to this incredible international diversity that was a real goal, not only of NYU, which was already so international, and New York is, of course, such a cosmopolitan city, but also a vision for this emirate and for the UAE, wishing to bring talent here. And to this day, in fact, we are about to graduate our 8th class, and some 40% of our students, although most of them are from other countries, stay here after graduation, work here, contribute to the knowledge economy and the building of the society in many ways, although many also go back out into the world. And Emiratis go out into the world on their Rhodes scholarships to Oxford and so on and so forth. We're still building out our graduate position. We have very strong PhD programs jointly offered with NYU, where there's, of course, in New York, a larger base of faculty, although by now we have more than 300 faculty here. Still, for vigorous PhD programs, of course, you need really strong faculty in research in all these different areas. And 330 faculty alone couldn't cover all of that, but it's a wonderful joint program in all the STEM fields that you could think of, basically. And we're beginning to grow our master's programs with very strong regional inflections in areas like fine arts, which is a very lively, the artist scene around the Middle East is extremely lively, but there is very little training. So we are bringing that university grounded And we launched a master's in economics, again, because strong finance degrees are still, and economics degrees are still a work in progress also in this region, and there's a lot of need. So we also look, how can we best contribute to the development of the local knowledge economy, and again, more equitable societies in general here and around the world. So I've said a lot, and I just would say, we are young. We'd love to have you come visit us as soon as time allows, anyone in the IAU. And our motto for our 10th anniversary is "Here we grow," and we grow in many dimensions.
Right, wonderful. Thank you so much for presenting your institution, and thank you all and indeed also Kat and David. Really, really good to get a understanding of where you're coming from, and indeed it is wonderful to have, you know, these 3 continents at least. And then Mariette, you also mentioned, of course, you know, being a hub and in very close connection also to Africa and to further east to Asia. And so indeed we kind of get a very local, and at the same time we have an international perspective on the theme of what is a good university, and indeed what is quality in a university, and to maybe try and come closer to the actual theme of our webinar today. Mariette, you just mentioned it yourself. Equitable societies. You all mentioned the importance of community, of this direct also relationship with students. We are seeing a time in which there's a huge transformation. We are, of course, you know, within altogether in a pandemic, which has its special consequences also for the higher education landscape. But we're also in a time of equitable societies, of questions of race, of Black Lives Matter throughout, as a global phenomenon indeed, not only in the US. So my question is, in your perspective, in the last year and last 2 years, and where we have these big societal developments, has quality for higher education, quality for your university, the question of what is quality for your particular institution, has that changed in any way? Maybe Kat, you can come in first. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I think the pandemic has taught us, probably most importantly, that we have to have an infrastructure to be prepared for the unknown. And, you know, whether that is a major health crisis like we've seen, or some other social issue. And you have to have a team that is ready to pivot at any point in time. You have to have a mindset that we are going to preserve the mission and we are going to maybe advance the mission, even in the context of great stress and great unknown. And I think a lot of that speaks to, in terms of what I've seen in the last year, is having the right team in place. Probably one of the biggest messages of the pandemic for us here at this institution is to have a team that knows how to work as a team. Have a team that is willing to get together and to talk about consequences, even though many of those consequences may be unforeseen and we've never experienced them before. And so it's really highlighted, you know, that quality oftentimes begins in our people. And I think as leaders, we have to make sure that we are expecting excellence from our people. We are expecting excellence from each other. And I will tell you, that's really what I saw as President Whitten led this team through the last year and the last, 18 months or so. Because you never knew on a given day what was going to happen. You never knew on a given day what new message was going to be coming from, whether it be the CDC or, what new implication could be happening from a societal basis. And so you sit on the edge of your chair, but you do it with confidence and you do it with focus on the mission of the institution. And so I think one of the biggest things that I've taken away from this is just the importance of your people, and that they are focused on excellence. They're focused on quality. They're making sure that students have a great experience in a really difficult time. And then realizing that students are struggling, right? Students, it's been challenging for all of us in different ways. Our student body, we love the students that we have at Kennesaw State. They are excellent students. Most of them are first generation students, which is phenomenal. The opportunity that we have to impact the legacy of the lives of these students and generations is so exciting. But they also don't have a lot of resources at their disposal. And so when they struggle, we can't just separate ourselves and say, that's your struggle. We're here to educate you. We have to put our arms figuratively around them and figure out how we can provide additional support. And that really takes people that look at solving issues and solving problems from that perspective. So, being prepared mentally and intellectually as a leadership team, having an infrastructure. I think all of us will think about our infrastructure, our technological infrastructure, our health infrastructure, our communication infrastructures as we move forward, and how we can make sure that they are solid, but that they can also pivot when needed.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, I'll pass the word straight over to David with the very same question. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And I think just picking up a couple of words that Kat used there, certainly focus and people are ones that I would echo strongly. I think, the organization certainly had to be very responsive and move very quickly. Institutions like universities, even young institutions like universities ourselves, are not used to moving quickly. Trying to get things through academic council can be somewhat challenging at times. But I think in the face of a pandemic, seeing how people responded and took a very sensible approach around focusing on the core requirements and the fundamentals that had to be delivered and how they were going to support both each other and the student body in terms of engaging with the programs, I think is one of the key take homes. So a key challenge for us within the universities then is to figure out, how do we take some of the lessons we've learned and embed them and use them to better effect into the future? And I don't think anybody will suggest that we will go fully back to where we were. We're not going to stay as we currently are, but it's finding that lessons learned and the benefits is going to be a key piece. And that's something we're working on here. I think in addition to that, I think another element that really came to the fore over the last year is the fact that we pride ourselves on engaging with our students and supporting them, but we've had to do that in a very different way. And the modes of communication and the ways in which we can engage have been challenged, and we've had to find novel solutions. And I think a lot of those we can also benefit from taking the good approaches and learning from each other about that. Because, to Kat's point around supporting students, we would have had similar experiences where students have many challenges. Many will face academic challenges that we're aware of, others have challenges around the resources they have. But some of the surprising anecdotal stories that come through are of students having real issues where, they had to go and work in a car because there's no space at home. There's a family of 8 and there's nowhere to work. They can't get broadband, they can't access. So these are things that wouldn't normally appear in a traditional environment. And so I think we're now much more aware of the fact that the range of supports that universities can provide to students is actually even broader than we thought. And how we engage and support students into the future is, again, something I think we can usefully take from the years' experience that we've had, and ensure that we can do that. I think finally, supporting your staff and supporting the people in the university is key, and enabling and supporting approaches to mental health and well-being, and providing resources or tools and techniques that people can adapt and use as best fits them, again, is something that we would try and do and have tried to do as much as possible over the last year. So it's a very mixed bag of places where we've had to develop new experiences, but I think collectively all of those things come together and really actually do add to what we can do in the future very significantly.
Thank you, David. Yeah, excellent. I'll pass the floor to Mariette. Indeed, again, quality. We'll be speaking about various different aspects of quality in a moment, but just again to reflect on the last 2 years and this extraordinary situation for all of us, and especially from a perspective of higher education. You know, what have we learned about quality during these last 2 years, especially with the pandemic? But maybe also we can go into the social aspects of you know, societal perspectives that have changed possibly over the last 2 years. But indeed, what I'm hearing from Kat and David is that a good university is one that can provide good teaching and do good, you know, good knowledge provision even during a pandemic. I'll pass it to you.
Well, I think it's very moving to hear what they said, and our own experience on our campus, which you see behind me. You see my campus here behind me. It's been a very moving experience the last 15, 16 months, working with an extraordinary community that, as I began to indicate in my first remarks, has a utopian character. We were created to bring good ideas together, good thought, very fine professors, very international, find these students everywhere. And that's been both a strength and an especial challenge for us because, as I said, our students are from more than 115 countries. Our professors are from more than 45, the staff more than 60. So that in very many ways, when the borders started closing in on us and in the world in March into April, many of our people who, although we all love being here, that's why we're here, we're also very far from home and very far from loved ones. We're a residential campus. Most people live on campus. The faculty is more distributed and staff through the community, but all the students live on campus. And so in March 15, I had one of those mission critical questions of responsibility to these students from around the world, many of whom are first gen, many not from very well-resourced families or countries. And the very first decision we had to make that seemed exactly the right mission critical decision is not to send the students home. And even though our campus is dense, we were willing to take that risk, and we were allowed to think of our campus as their home. The UAE too sent its students home, you know, to go studying online. If we had done that, only our local students could have gone home. So that was a critical decision because we didn't want our students to be stuck in airports or be a risk to their homes, often very small homes, very crowded, be a lean on the resources of the family to learn online. So even though we too went online, we began to treat this campus as a kind of an autarkic home, but that essentially itself had lockdown all around it. But on the campus, we could live out our mission. And we did it by constantly reminding ourselves and our people of that mission and maintaining community connection through just a relentless stream of new modes of communication among us. Town halls that brought faculty and staff and students together to talk about this, not in separate spaces. All sorts of mechanisms. And because we were all, and we could see each other, we knew that we were there. Even if we were teaching, I was teaching my course, I teach a course a year. I knew that my students were there. It was different from thinking they were far away. You could see them when you got a little cup of coffee to take back to your office, as you might be allowed to. And it really strengthened the community. So for every decision we made, we created this simple framework, 3 principles. The first is community value is health and safety is the highest priority. The health of one of us is the health of all of us. So when you have to roll out all these horrible restrictions, there is that constant mantra in people's heads. The second is academic continuity is what we promise. We promise it to the faculty. We have all these wonderful research labs. Research activities must continue. Creative activities in the studio will help you take them online or do whatever we can to make them available. If you're a student, we will make sure you can graduate. We will make sure that these courses are going to be maybe not perfect, but are going to be as good as our professors are. And our professors are very good and very committed to the mission. So that was that second principle, continuity of academic aspiration, not just of degree progress, but aspirational. And then the third was solidarity. this institution was built on international solidarity, just as the IAU is, international academic solidarity. And this country, the UAE, has thrown every last resource, and it is a resourceful country, but it's thrown everything at mitigating the risks of the pandemic, including helping many other countries with vaccines, testing, supplies, and so forth. So we could always kind of tap into this, even when we had to make hard decisions that nobody liked. I mean, you have to make lots of decisions that people don't like, right? But I feel that in many ways our community grew together, and we were lucky in a way to have this youthful mission to keep pushing on, which our students too feel very strongly about. I've said a lot, so I'm very eager to talk about these other social dimensions that have been laid bare, but eager to hear the other panelists on those as well. You're on mute. The word of the year.
You're on mute, indeed. The word of the year. Indeed. Yes. I was just going to say, for those who can lip read, you might have understood, but I was just going to say that in the blurb to this webinar, we opened up a few more questions when it comes to quality, of course. Quality, as I said in the very beginning, it's a blurred concept. We speak about quality. It is a desirable asset, a desirable quality of an institution, but it is very difficult to define, and there are many, many aspects and many approaches to defining quality. And today, what we really wanted to do is go beyond those indicators that allegedly denote some sort of an approach to that theme. We wanted to go beyond and speak about quality in an institutional sense when it comes to ethics, when it comes to its democratic quality, quality in terms of community engagement, quality of being able maybe to absorb the community and inculcate and integrate wisdom and knowledge, local knowledge into a curriculum, these kinds of themes. And I'll start with Kat. You said something very interesting in the beginning, that you have 70% of your student population, if I understood that correctly, is from minorities. Is that correct?
47%.
47, so very large. And of course, in the US, we've seen huge transformations, but it's spill over across the globe in terms of equality, equity, and what all three of you have in common is that you seem to have many students coming as a first generation. So basically, where their family maybe did not have an academic background or academic experience, university experience. So that is one thing that brings it together. So that is another question of accessibility. So in those terms, for you, Kat, at Kennesaw State, how do you see quality? What is, when you say the mission, you've spoken about it, but maybe also drive it towards the quality. What for you is a good institution? What is quality at Kennesaw State University? What are you trying to achieve?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. And, obviously challenges in the United States and the social area, but also right here in Atlanta. So it's hit very, very close to home over the last year as well. And, quality in terms of being responsive and substantive, I think that's a word that's kind of resonating with me during this conversation is how can we do things that are substantive, not just check boxes that I think, large institutions can get very good at checking boxes and not really doing substantive things. So when we think about quality in the area of ethics or in the area of social change or community engagement, I think we have to look at what is substantive. How are we having a substantive, a real impact and real engagement? In the social area, we pull our students together. First of all, we have a wonderful vice president of student affairs who when things are happening in society that are challenging and disturbing, we bring our students together and we have conversations with them, but most importantly, we listen to them. because sometimes the narrative is changing, and the way we may have responded 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago is not what our students need now. And it's not just our students, it's also our faculty and our staff. The president put in new leadership in this area back about 2 years ago, and it's had a transformative impact on our campus. So I would say I know what non-quality is in this space, where conversations weren't done in a strategic, intentional, helpful way. And I know what quality is in that space, and it's transformative. It'll have an impact on the campus. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. We're not perfect, because there's so many different perspectives on this. In the area of community engagement, one of the things that I find so challenging in higher education is how do we, again, substantively track what we do and the impact of what we do. And sometimes we know it's good when we see it and we feel it, but people want to hear, they want to hear in a tangible way what that is. And, when you have partnerships in the school system, when our faculty who are educators go into the school system and they have an impact either in the classroom or they impact policy within that community, it can be a powerful change. And you begin to see that policy impact have not only an effect locally in our own community, but it begins to spread across the state. To me, that is quality. That is not, that is substantive. It has a great deal of meaning to it. When you see the lives of individuals in the community changed because of the engagement of faculty. So we have a class that does service learning, and in that they go in and they work with youth that are in juvenile detention centers. And these are young people that they're getting ready to transition back into society. And so they put some peers, students that are a little bit older than they are, put some peers with them to help them transition back into the community. That's substantive. It's going to change a life, even if that's an N of one. It has an impact. And for a moment in time, somebody cared about that student. So those are the kind of things that we get excited about. As leaders on a campus, you have to get out and talk to people, or you're going to miss those things. If you're not really engaged in what's happening on the front line in your institution, you will miss those things and miss those wonderful stories.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, great to hear. Really, really important reflections on indeed the interpersonal aspect also of quality in higher education. Yeah, I'll pass the floor to David, please, with again the same kind of question.
Okay, thanks for that. And I suppose the societal interaction and the measure of quality within the university, as Kat says, trying to put a substantive value on that is difficult. But what we are trying to do is to ensure that we create impact and have an impactful outcome, if you like, on our students, but also on the wider society. One of the first acts that you mentioned earlier, as a new university, of course, we had to shape and frame a strategic plan. And we took the UN Sustainable Development Goals as the lens through which we looked at our future strategic plan. And we ended up with 3 pillars within the strategic plan: people, planet, and partnerships. And it was quite striking, actually, when we went out and we engaged both internally and externally with stakeholders, the interest and contribution that people wanted to make around engaging in themes that were of interest to them, particularly in the people and partnership elements for the community side, was really, really strong. And I felt we got both useful contribution, but also strong engagement that actually puts us in a good place for the future in working with our partners, whether they're in community groups or in the industry sectors. And from the students' point of view, the planet focus for our research and our educational program platform, if you like, was definitely very striking. The youth of today really want to make a difference. And I think the quality of what we do then is really in how we provide people with the tools and understanding to have an impact and to make a difference in what they do into the future. I suppose within the faculty, part of what we want to try and encourage is for our faculty to go out and engage strongly and to become known for leading and shaping societal debates around major issues. And I think, again, coming from and being a new organization, it perhaps gives us an opportunity to have that as a door opener and then to help start encouraging debates from a different direction that might be more difficult to start otherwise, particularly with groups that are not used to engaging with the academic community. So for us, the quality is about what impact we'll have long term and how we, through our graduates and through our faculty, can drive that impact across the three pillars of our strategic plan: the people, planet, and partnerships.
Thank you, David. Excellent. So impact and the more longitudinal, so strategic plan in terms of, roughly orientated around the SDGs. Fascinating stuff. Thank you very much. Mariette, I'll pass the floor to you. Thank you.
Quality. I love the answers that have been given. I was trained as a historian of art, and then when you're trained as an art historian, especially of what are called old master paintings, there's old paintings, but you're often taught about quality and connoisseurship. And I learned early on in my graduate trajectory at NYU that quality, it made me nervous because it could be a very conservative term. Because if you have a certain framework of quality, it becomes really hard to see outside of it. And I think I've come to think of it that way in higher education as well. And so I really like Kat's word substantive. I think that that's a good way to think about it, because that can change. Substance changes depending on what a society needs, what a student needs, what a faculty member needs for their labs and so forth. So let me riff on that for a little bit. It can get in the way of innovation, I think is what I'm saying. But let's see, what does good quality mean? Because it's not bad to have good quality by traditional university measures, because that's how universities are recognizable. And that is also important, of course. So by traditional measures, good, of course, means doing well by certain easily recognizable standards. International standards, even though we know they're very unequally distributed across the international system of higher education. But what are they? High quality research with lots of citations, top peer reviewed publications, patents, creative productions that win prizes. Of course, it means also a great intake of qualified talent. I've been bragging about our students. They are super talented, it's true, and we select them very selectively. That is all true. Great graduation rates in a reasonable time, and then great placement, so the students go on to do great things. All of these things are measures of quality, and I'm happy to say that our three institutions here, I think, represent that kind of quality very well in our different ways. However, I think rightly that society now, and lots of voices in our societies, are putting a lot of pressure on the academies and say, well, how good are you really? You are good by your own measures, internal measures to intellectual and academic discourse. Are you good for society? Are you good for individuals? Are you good for my kid? Are you good for my city? Are you good for my state? Are you good for the world? And so forth. And I think that's actually very healthy. Although the critique tends to be very limiting in another way that I want to say something about. Of course, it has become important to ask not just if the university and the faculty in them and the graduates are doing well by all these traditional measures, but also whether they are doing good. I think that that is what you're hearing from all of us on this panel here today. And it certainly is a really high priority for us at Nyu Abu Dhabi, because we were founded to create an international community of scholars and scientists and writers and artists and entrepreneurs and inventors who want to do good as well. It's okay to want to do well. There's nothing wrong with that. We want people to help that. So there's, you could say, on the level of higher education, of a really good quality education that truly is good, I would say, the university offers a broad benefit to society. And of course, its home countries is important, but also to individuals to flourish within those social frameworks, and ideally on an ethical and equitable basis. So those are not quite the same things. And what I worry about is that in today's rhetoric of nation building around certain research enterprises and educational enterprises, this benefit is largely cast as economic. It's important, we get it. People want good jobs, people want to be able to live well. This is of course important, but there is so much more to being and becoming a full human being, living a purposeful life, and deploying one's capacities in a way that helps society forward, not just in raw terms, bottom line terms of an economy. And so I think a good university helps students shape their lives, not just while they're in university or through the specific expertise of their majors or degrees, but also by fostering reflective and critical habits of mind, empathy, skills of collaboration and talking with others, and especially listening to others, taking action for social good. And I want to say this year, I am so thrilled that our young people that populate our universities, and not only young people, of course, we know that the student populations are diverse age-wise, but this new generation really wants us to do better in what we give them and how we use our powerful knowledge institutions, they are powerful, to create a better world and not just to hew to traditional measures of quality.
Thank you, Mariette. Yeah, wonderful. So important also to hear your voicing the quality also in terms of going beyond, of course, the economic aspect of and higher education aspect of higher education training of a degree, and the shaping of the lives, fostering reflexive critical minds, really expanding the breadth really and the competences of the students in order to cope not only with the narrow needs of a future job and their training and the learning that goes into that, but also really to participate within a wider community. And that is really exactly also what we're trying to gain at with this discussion, is the aspects of quality that we might not have picked up within discussions about rankings, for instance, etc., etc. So if I may, Cathy, the question of quality also going beyond your institution itself, you know, going towards maybe a national discussion on quality of what universities in the US or in North America might need to, might mean. How do you as university leader engage in this? So there are really two aspects here to my question. Is this webinar is part of our leadership program as well. So we ask university leaders, how do you lead towards quality? How do you influence your staff, and how do you influence within your university those to subscribe to a common concept of quality? Once it's defined, it's not that easy, and that's part of the debate today. So that's one part of the question. The second part really is to go beyond the university, the institution, and to see how do you engage on a more national level on a debate of quality, and try to ensure that there's also common ownership of a common discourse of quality.
So I think Mariette was very, very articulate in terms of some of the challenges that we face in higher education, and some of it is in terms of what value do we provide in higher education, and it's not the same as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or 12 years ago. So I think on a national and on an international level, like we're doing today, we have to answer those questions about what is our value proposition. Why should students pursue higher education? And again, all of us have different missions of our institution. We serve different student bodies, we serve different discipline areas. And so asking that question as to why should a student spend a significant amount of their time and a significant amount of their resources in this way is, I think, a really important one we need to address if we're going to attempt to understand quality. Because if you go back 10 or 15, 20 years ago, there was just an assumption that if you went to higher education, if you went to college, if you went to university, that was a good thing. And that can't be the assumption anymore. And so I think it makes all of us have to ask that question in terms of what is our value proposition. And to be honest with you, a lot of the academics on a campus don't like that question at all, right? Because it almost feels like we're monetizing what we do more than we want to do so in higher education. I know we're still about 35% state funded by the state of Georgia. And so that is something that our Board of Governors asks all the time, is why would we have students come to an institution in the state of Georgia, public institution in the state of Georgia, and they not graduate with a way to have, make a great living and that type of thing. And so we're really struggling with how to preserve some of what made higher education wonderful, and that has to do with the liberal arts part of it, and then coupling it with it a way that students are not leaving from here greatly in debt and carrying debt into their future. And so to me, that's, as somebody who's kind of later in the career, and I've seen kind of a different higher education in my past, that's been a really fun challenge to wrestle with and to kind of work through that particular transition. I think also, kind of to get to your first question, I think we really have to educate our campuses on where higher education is right now and what's going on with higher education. And we need to think more about not, and I'm really talking about our faculty and our staff, we need not to just put them in their jobs and have them do their routine jobs and expect that all their contributions will roll up to great success and great quality if they don't understand the context in which they're working. And I think it's a fabulous context. I'm very, very positive on higher education, and I still think it has a wonderful future. But we really do need to do a better job of engaging our staff and our faculty in terms of what higher education is about. So my team, a couple of us on my team this past semester have done some presentations just in that vein. And so, much like this, we'll get on a Zoom call and we'll have a presentation on, finance and higher education, or a presentation on curriculum. And the whole idea is to get folks to think differently. If you're thinking like it was a decade ago, you're probably behind. And so, transition is always a struggle, and we as leaders need to help and make sure that our staff and our faculty understand this new context, but we also want to preserve some of those wonderful things about higher education that have been in place for hundreds of years.
David, may I pass the floor to you? Same two questions, really, having to do with, how do you advocate for higher education on a national level or beyond your institution, and then also the question of leadership. How do you make it part of your leadership agenda?
Yeah, I'll take the first one first. I guess Ireland is a small country, and that has challenges and benefits. And one of the benefits is that we are closely connected, both between the institutions of higher education and then, of course, with the policymakers, governments and departments and so on. And I think for senior leadership within the higher education in Ireland, it's relatively easy to be able to engage and to try and contribute and influence on policy issues that are going to impact on us. And that could be in relation to student funding and student supports, or bigger policies around how the universities are going to be developed and funded. And we are, essentially very much funded by the state, and it varies between institutions, but we would have very strong state support, which is a benefit to us. I think the other element about being small is that, of course, we also then are able to engage with stakeholders very easily and very broadly, because the key people become well known and well identified. But fundamentally, I think what we would try and do, and I think across Ireland and the institutions here, is to engage strongly in networks. And those networks may be national, but because we're small, we also want to look internationally. And so, the IAU or the European University Association are key entities for us to engage with and to try and meet with relevant, like-minded individuals that we can start to discuss and debate how people are approaching these issues in their own context, and then try and bring that home to what we do here. So Ireland historically has had a very outward-looking attitude, and we claim to have the highest number of diaspora globally, and certainly you can go pretty much anywhere in the world and find somebody who, if they aren't Irish, they're related to somebody who is. So that's a benefit at times as well. So that networking and building that engagement, both nationally and internationally, is something we would focus on. In terms of the leadership within the university, I suppose part of it is very much about the senior leadership team setting the tone and doing the things that we want all of our staff to be seen to be doing. So engaging, communicating, and trying to support where we can, and to identify and call out issues as we see them come up. And within our strategic plan, the EDI agenda is, quality, diversity, inclusion agenda is very strong, front and foremost, and it's a key part of my office as president, and it informs a lot of what we do. So I think that helps us position things, I think, very strongly within the university, and then it helps people come in behind it if they see the approach and the tone that's being set at the top. I think that's a key element for me.
Mariette, you said very much at the beginning, and I love that, taking your perspective from as an art historian, maybe in the very beginning, and thinking about quality, what is possibly, I mean, of course, as an art historian, what is a good piece of art? Very simple and yet incredibly complex question. You said that quality has some conservative connotations, and indeed might be set against innovation. Which again, I think is a fascinating juxtaposition of these two, if they're correct to be debated, but it's a very, very interesting way of proposing and approaching this theme. David just said setting the tone within university leadership in order to possibly, hope, as a cascading, or in fact as a bottom-up approach to a question of quality within a higher education institution. From your experience as a university leader, how do you set the tone? How do you engage with your colleagues on a question of quality? And what are the mechanisms within your institution that will give you feedback on what quality might mean? Where are the discussions amongst staff? Where does that happen? Do you allow that to happen? And in what way can you influence those discussions? And again, also, possibly the other part of your of the question is the question of going beyond the institution itself, and to see how can higher education in a systemic way grapple with the question of quality. Thank you, Mariette.
Thank you, Andreas. I like the way that you've connected these two questions, which might not be so evident for everyone. And I think that the thing I would say about leadership beyond your institution depends on credible leadership within it. If you don't have your own house in order, you should not be out there telling other people how to put it in order, right? So, or it would be hard to bring good partners to your table, which is very much the kind of way I like to work. So let me start with Nyu Abu Dhabi. And of course, my statement on quality was meant to be provocative because, of course, we're doing all these things that I said. We have outstanding researchers. We have great promotion and tenure process. We have a fabulous record of accomplishment of our students and so forth. So all of that you need to have. I was questioning whether quality is the word for it, because quality easily becomes constraining. And also we know that the higher education system itself is so unequal that if we're all going to measure every university precisely by only those things, then I think we will not have great solidarity within that whole system. So that's where my comments sort of came from. And I also think within the university, you end up then maybe forgetting about some really important aspects of a university community that, if you don't attend to them, can get in the way of quality traditionally defined for many people. Many people would not have access to it because they weren't taught that that quality was important, didn't go to a good high school, didn't get access to advanced placement courses or whatever it might be in your local setting. So what does leadership towards a really good university mean today? I think it really means empowering people to have access to the full plenitude of the research and learning community that you're trying to create. And that means remediating and doing your darn best to remediate historical inequalities in this regard. And this is, of course, something we know very well around the world. In every country, it plays out in some way or another. In the United States, a lot of inequality around education and higher education is organized around inherited wealth or not. That often maps onto race and ethnicity or immigrant status. It often maps onto gender, although less and less so, I'm happy to say. That we really have made progress on gender. It registers in various, in the LGBTQ plus community, whether people can have full access to the resources of an institution or a higher education system. So I certainly think that as a leader of any university, as you come in, and I've only been there almost 2 years now, you have to think about what can you accomplish in the time that you're going to be there, which is, what is it? Is it up to 10 years maybe? You have to think about what can you achieve that hasn't been done yet. First, of course, you look to, is your academic house in order, as I've said before? And to do that, you do need all those traditional measures. And you look at the talent and you make sure that as a leader, you have a wonderful provost, which we do, Arlie Petters. You have a wonderful set of deans. One of them, Marta Losada, is on the board of the IAU. Very high quality scholar, a scientist from Colombia. You make sure that you get a great team in place and you get out of the way. You help remove roadblocks, you listen to what they need, what they're interested in, but you really let that academic side of the house, even though I'm a scholar myself, you let the people there who are hired to do that run with it and follow through on their ideas with all their creativity and help them unleash the creativity of their fellow faculty and researchers and graduate students. And then on the other side of the house, you really have to think about the culture of the place, which goes to all these other areas of quality that are not traditional and yet really important to the excellence of an institution. And those are matters of inclusion, equity, and belonging in a diverse community and understanding how your community is diverse. Every community is diverse up to a point, of course, but how does that relate to equity within the society that you're serving, the country that you're serving, maybe the state that you're serving? It's all situational, but pushing hard on that is where I think university leaders can make all the difference. They really can, because they can empower the people who do equity and inclusion work and put them right in your office so that they talk to you. You can create very empowered committees of faculty, staff, and students coming together to hold your feet to the fire and ask the institution, how are we doing in terms of admissions? What does our population look like? Where are the gaps and why are there these gaps? Are we remediating these gaps? Does everyone understand what the curriculum looks like to someone who comes from outside our little academic world and doesn't understand some of the terms of engagement, and should be allowed and enabled to get there, but also bring their own identities to these processes? These are obviously huge and complicated questions, but they're very interesting to work on. And I think if you come to them with authenticity and a sense that you really yourself are interested in this and are willing to put resources to the learning of others about it and doing projects together to improve that kind of register of quality in your institution, I think it becomes easier over time. And so that's one area where I think leadership is so important, and setting the tone, as David has said, and then empowering the people and bringing resources to it. The other big one for us is environmental sustainability and mitigating climate change on the institutional, the research, and the personal level. And again, these are the kinds of areas that cut across everything. it's not one discipline you're favoring, or one dorm, or one student organization, or one department. It really cuts across the whole institutional culture. So finding a few of those, I think, where you can really have an impact if you stay focused, is I think, important to university leadership.
Wonderful. Mariette, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're slightly running out of time. I want to give the floor to Hilletje van 't Land, the Secretary General of the IAU. So from my side, I will just say thank you very much for this very, very engaging discussion today. And I'm taking away substantive, I'm taking away impact, and I'm taking away the multiplicity of quality, really, on all kinds of levels. I'll pass the word to Hilletje van 't Land, and thank you again.
Well, thank you, Andreas. This is actually to give the floor to all the participants, because while you were speaking, I think that your presentation sparked a lot of interest. You may have seen a few of the questions in the Q&R, and the questions are quite rich, and I will unfortunately have to undo justice to all and select only a few. There were questions in the chat and in the Q&A, so if you want, you can have a look also for yourself. So let me start by thanking you for this incredibly rich discussion on trying to define what quality of higher education is. And there is maybe one question that I would wish to come back to start, and that is somebody in the Q&A said that in particular, Kathy Schwaig, you have mentioned the fact that universities of today are no longer the same as they were 10 years ago. And somehow this is also what you, David, have had to struggle with while building a new university on the basis of older ones. What is it that you then do create anew? And Mariette, you've created something totally new in a totally new environment. So the question from the Q&A was, what is then so different? What are the things that make for a totally new university or new context for universities to strive in? Maybe start with that one. And then there was another question that you could take on board maybe at the same time, also conscious of time, is the one that was making a nice link between this webinar and previous IAU webinars, where in previous webinars we've also discussed the value-based leadership dimension that all three of you have also mentioned a few times in your responses to the questions. And the very question is about where do we see, what do panelists believe are those demographic, civil and democratic challenges that higher education of quality should respond to? So the first one on this transformation and the university not being in the same context anymore. And then the second question as the various dimensions a quality higher education should respond to. Shall I start with Kathy, since the first question was initially to you and to all?
Sure. Happy to. So I think to answer that question about just the change, and certainly a change that I've seen in my time in higher education over the last few decades, I think first of all, you have to think about the purpose of higher education. And I think that's a big piece of it. And I also think in the past, a lot of higher education institutions, not all, were more closed systems. They defined what mattered. They defined how education should be. They defined what the curriculum should be. And there wasn't a lot of interaction with the community beyond that. And I think today's society just simply doesn't tolerate that, right? We can't just exist as a closed system. Some of the consequences, at least here in the United States, that came after the Great Recession in 2008, was a lot of students that graduated with a lot of debt. And they are still, in some cases, dealing with that debt today. And so they themselves have to ask themselves, did I really get what I needed to out of higher education in order to be successful today? Inside the academy, we don't like to think of ourselves as purely about workforce development. That's not how we were trained. That's not how we were brought up. And so I think those are some of the biggest questions and issues that we have to wrestle with in higher ed now. So it gets to this whole notion. I used to be a business school dean, so it doesn't bother me. But this whole notion of what is your value proposition? Why are you coming here? You know, I love the institution that I'm at Kennesaw State because we value the liberal arts. I went and got a degree a few years ago in the liberal arts because I wanted to learn more in that space. And so we value it and we care deeply about it. We also care about our students, you know, having a successful life and having a career afterwards. We put something in place this year, and I think about it kind of as allow students to pursue their passion at their undergraduate level. And allow them to get a master's that's also going to help them have a great career. So it's a pathway so that students can get both an undergraduate degree and a graduate degree in a short period of time. For us, that's an exciting way to address some of these challenges.
Okay, thank you. David, would you be able to combine those two questions, or you take only one part of it?
Absolutely. I suppose in terms of the transformative agenda, I think really the difference, as Kat outlined, is focusing on the outcome and the needs of the future. And I think we are much more focused on the fact that not only are we preparing people with some core skills and some core abilities and knowledge, but a really fundamental ability to be able to adapt and learn and keep on learning and keep on adapting. And I think that is a total change in mindset to all those many decades ago when I certainly came through, where you learned engineering and that was it. Mechanical engineering, fit and forget. But that's not the way anymore by a long stretch. So I think in the Irish context, one of our challenges, just touching on the second question, the demographics nationally are such that we have a rising young population who will all want to be employed and will all want very rewarding careers and can't all work in the same roles and with the same job types. So providing diversity of opportunity and an ability to enable progression through an educational structure is really the key challenge for us. And I think that's part of what we want to do within our transformative agenda.
Thank you. Mariette?
Yes, I think I would endorse the fact that we think about work transformation these days. I do think our universities and certainly Nyu Abu Dhabi offers a transformative experience to its students because we put students so much in the driver's seat of charting their intellectual and academic trajectory, because we need to prepare them for a future where they're not going to have just one job or even three. They'll have to change jobs maybe 5 times or more, and even entire sectors. And we know that that's said a lot, but it is a real reality. So although our degrees are recognizable, the recognizability is still important to students. Most of our students come from very traditional high schools in some ways and have learned in a sort of roadway. So we open up how they learn by really stressing research, and undergraduate research, I think, is one of the true transformations that we've seen in so many universities. It can be hard to deliver, but if you let people collaborate, the collaboration and collaborative projects are also a major change from the old testing regimen. I heard someone say a wonderful thing, the former president of the American University of Cairo the other day. She said, think about it. And she's long retired from that role now. She said, think about it. What is the one thing that our traditional universities just hammered on and hammered on and hammered on that you will never have to do in any job you take just about? It's taking a multiple choice exam or even taking any exam. So I thought that was an extremely fundamental insight. And certainly our students come not wanting to know only how to write a 30-page research paper or complete a test. They want to see product that they can take with them out into the world. And so we are really focused on changing all these modalities in which we can assess how students have learned and particularly how they've been able to transform, take what they got in their courses and create new knowledge with it for themselves and new self-awareness about what they can do in the world. I think that's the biggest part of transformation for me.
Wonderful. I know, and I saw in the chat that both of you, Mariette and David, you will have to leave just before the hour, and I guess we're almost there. Yet I will just put the question to you that you can then think about at a later stage. This comes from a former dear colleague from the IAU, Stephanie Malo, who has worked with us on sustainable development, was coming from Germany and Sweden at the same time and opted for a PhD in Costa Rica. And her question is quite challenging to our debate as well, because she says, well, how do you actually believe that, or what are the indicators to recognize a quality university internationally? And would you, for instance, rather partner with one in Germany, in Sweden, or in Costa Rica? And how does that also impact partnership development at institutions? So probably you don't have the time to look into that specifically, but I'm trying to speak even faster and stumble over my words, just to give that to you as a gift away. But she has another point that I also find fascinating, and that is, she says the examples that are being discussed here are very student focused, yet she came from two systems, Germany, Sweden, that were free education provision to the students, and there was much less attention to the students per se. So it was not student-centered in the way that we have been discussing it here as being an essential ingredient for quality higher education. And she says, yet the education she has benefited from in those two other countries was also of very high quality. So how to balance that, that would be very interesting, and probably then a discussion for next time. Maybe I can give you 1 second to say something, Mariette, 1 second, David, and then Kathy, I hope you will have a few more minutes to discuss this with us. Mariette?
Thank you. Great questions, both. I know these different education systems very well as well, and I think you can get good education in many of these different kinds of systems and situations. When I see at the sort of leading edge work that students want to do today, not maybe 15 years ago, it's more in that project, collaborative, bring something good into the world mode than I remember in my own outstanding liberal arts education at Williams College. As for partnerships, we don't look at these traditional measures. We look at where is the interest of our faculty, where do they want to collaborate, and we facilitate that. Where is the interest of our students, and how can we find synergy and compatibility, no matter where that university is? So I think Nyu Abu Dhabi is always open to talking.
Wonderful. And if you disappear in a minute, thank you very much already for your wonderful contribution to this panel. David, I know you also have to fly out.
So thank you for that. And I might just build on Mariette's last point there. I think certainly, you know, the interest of the faculty, the interest of the students are key in terms of establishing partnerships, but I think also a sense of shared value and mission, you know, that we want to be heading in the same direction. So the corporate piece is very much around, or do we share the same values and the same sense of quality and, you know, our ultimate impact and achievements that we can develop in a shared sense. So again, an international agenda is very much part of what we want to develop, and that's the approach that we would take. So,
yeah, and there much. I would challenge you on one point, not sure. challenge, but I would put to you and pushing the time limit here, but you said like-minded people. Sometimes it's also wonderful, and maybe that's what you have in your campuses, to have not like-minded people, but to confront ideas and then disrupt and develop new things. So that would be another question.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and thank you for picking me up on that. You're right. It's not that we have groupthink and everybody should be thinking the same, but our ultimate objectives should be shared, and the views that we have around that may well be different, but yeah.
Yeah, because I was sure you wanted to also convey that so that nobody picks up on the wrong interpretation. Thank you very much. And we know you have to leave. Thank you for your time. Wonderful.
Thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
And so, Kathy, you have the floor. It's all yours.
Well, thank you. I have a 10 o'clock meeting I'm going to have to jump into. But so let me answer the response. You know, I think our institution has a long history of prioritizing global education and international partnerships. And what I love to see is how we sometimes do that at the institutional level. Sometimes we'll do that at the college level, very discipline driven. And then sometimes it's done at the personal level, faculty member level, where faculty relationships are developed for the benefit of the students and for the benefit of the university. And so, and I agree with you. It's sometimes the tension of difference is a very, very positive thing, and it elevates all of us. So we are committed and seek partnerships and arrangements at every turn. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
And I want to thank you for that, and really say also to the audience, we didn't pick and choose you because you were actually like-minded in this openness, which is fantastic, but it was by chance. And it is wonderful to see that coming from such very diverse also policy dimensions and backgrounds and different strategic entry points for how to develop what is a good university, you share a lot on this importance of social dimensions, the diversity and the openness. So thank you for your wonderful insights and for having accepted on short notice to be with us today
It's my absolute pleasure.
to share
Thank
these
you.
wonderful insights. So thank you very much for your time and participation. Have a good meeting after this one.
Thank you. Enjoy.
And so, Andreas, I think we can, both of us, share that we just regret that we don't have more time, because there are excellent questions in the Q&A, and I would like to thank all the participants. We copy those and we continue to work around these questions and pick them up when we develop our next sessions in the IAU webinar series on the future of higher education. We see the complementarity of some of your questions, so I hope you will have recognized my attempt at bringing your different questions together in order to have some insights on what the speakers had to say on those very dynamics you put on the table, and we will explore them further definitely in coming webinars. So please come again next weeks to also attend important sessions on the digital transformation of higher education. We will look again at the transformation of internationalization dynamics, sustainable development, and in particular the engagement of higher education institutions with the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs will be high on the agenda, also in particular because we play an important role in the upcoming UNESCO World Conference on Education for Sustainable Development, where we will have a roundtable on higher education's role in addressing the global challenges while also responding to the local needs around the institutions. We will as well have a webinar dedicated specifically on the new dynamics around lifelong learning at universities, something we've worked on more extensively with the UNESCO Institute on Lifelong Learning, also preparing a report for the upcoming UNESCO World Higher Education Conference 2021 to take place in October. And there as well, we have a series of reports that we will feed into the World Higher Education Conference to represent the various voices that were also with us today in this very lively webinar. So I would like to thank you, Andreas, for the good questions and the moderation of this very lively debate. And I hope that the participants will agree that this was of interest to us all, but only calling for more debates in the weeks to come. So thank you very much to all. And please watch the webinar recordings from past session and from this session today. It will be made available in the dedicated space on the IAU website as well. And register for IAU's newsletter if you wish to learn more on a regular basis on what IAU has to offer to connect the global higher education community on an ongoing basis. So thank you very much, and looking forward to more in the weeks to come.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ilke. Bye-bye.
Thank you.